What if I told you that one of the coolest cars in movie history was actually real? Not just a fancy prop, but a fully working vehicle that could actually do the incredible stunts you saw on screen. This is the Tumbler, Batman's ride in Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight movies. And unlike most movie cars, this thing was the real deal. When you saw it jump across buildings or crash through walls, that wasn't computer graphics. That was actually happening. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. When most people think of the Batmobile, they picture something sleek and futuristic. But in 2005, director Christopher Nolan had a completely different idea. Instead of building a fancy sports car, he created what's basically a military tank that Batman could actually drive. The crazy part? Almost everything you see this vehicle do in the movies, the jumps, the speed, the crashes, it all really happened. No green screen, no digital effects, just incredible engineering and some very brave stunt drivers. Today, we're going to explore how they built this amazing machine, and I'll show you what happened when some famous people got to take it for a spin. So let's talk about what makes the Tumbler so special. If you've seen the older Batman movies, you know the Batmobile was always this sleek, almost art piece kind of car. Tim Burton's version looked like it came straight out of a Gothic cathedral, and the classic TV show version was basically a souped-up sports car with fins. But Christopher Nolan wanted something completely different for his Batman movies. His Gotham City felt real and gritty, so Batman needed a vehicle that looked like it could actually exist. Nolan's challenge to his team was pretty straightforward. Build a car that looks intimidating and can actually do everything we see it do in the movie. No cheating with computer effects. So, in this video, we're going to break down the whole story of how the Tumbler came to be. First, we'll look at where the idea started. Believe it or not, it began with some model cars in Christopher Nolan's garage. We'll see how the director and his design team literally glued toy cars together to create the basic concept. Then, we'll dive into the engineering challenge. How do you actually build a car that weighs as much as a small truck, but can still jump 60 feet through the air? The team had to solve problems that no car manufacturer had ever faced before. After that, we'll explore all the cool gadgets and weapons built into the Tumbler. From armor plating to machine guns, to that incredible motorcycle that pops out of the front. Yes, that was real too. And finally, we'll see what it was actually like to drive this thing. We'll check out some footage of celebrities who got to take it for a spin, including car enthusiast Leno. By the end of this video, you'll understand why the Tumbler isn't just a cool movie prop. It's actually one of the most impressive pieces of automotive engineering ever created for a film. So let's start at the beginning, in a garage where two guys decided to build the impossible. Every great idea has to start somewhere. For the Tumbler, that somewhere was actually Christopher Nolan's garage in Los Angeles. Now, you might think a Hollywood director would have some fancy design studio, but Nolan and his production designer Nathan Crowley literally locked themselves in a regular garage with a bunch of model car kits. Crowley later described their process as kit bashing, which is basically a fancy way of saying they took apart toy cars and glued the pieces back together in new ways. They had a model Lamborghini for the sleek, fast look and a model Humvee for that tough, military feel. Their goal was to combine the best of both worlds. What's really cool is that they built everything by hand first. They created a detailed 1/12 scale model that's about the size of a large action figure, and this little prototype became the blueprint for everything that followed. Nolan was very specific about what he wanted. The car had to look powerful and intimidating even when it was just sitting still. A big inspiration came from a famous Batman comic called The Dark Knight Returns by Frank Miller. In that story, Batman drives what's basically a tank through the streets. Miller's Batman was older and more serious, and his vehicle reflected that. Nolan loved this idea of Batman using military-grade equipment instead of flashy sports cars. And this is where the story in the movie comes from. In Batman Begins, Bruce Wayne doesn't build the Tumbler from scratch. He finds it gathering dust in Wayne Enterprises' research division. It was originally designed as a bridging vehicle. Basically, it was supposed to jump over rivers so military troops could cross. The project was cancelled because, well, it was probably a bit too crazy even for the military. This backstory is brilliant because it makes the whole thing believable. Bruce Wayne isn't some super engineer who built a tank in his basement. He's a guy who found a piece of abandoned military tech and thought, hey, this could work for fighting crime. It grounds the vehicle in reality, which was exactly what Nolan wanted for his more realistic take on Batman. The design process took months of refinement. They tried different proportions, different angles, different details. The final design had to look like something that could actually be built, not like a fantasy vehicle. Every line and curve had to serve a purpose, either for aerodynamics, protection, or intimidation. What's amazing is that this whole process, from garage experiments to final design, took place before they even knew if it was possible to actually build the thing. Nolan and Crowley were designing their dream car, but they had no idea if real-world engineering could make it work. That challenge would come next, and it would push automotive engineering to its limits. The key insight here is that the Tumbler didn't start with engineers or car designers. It started with storytellers who asked a simple question: what would Batman's car actually look like if it had to exist in the real world? The answer they came up with in that garage would soon become one of the most impressive vehicles ever built for a movie. But turning a garage experiment into a real, working vehicle that could perform movie stunts, that was going to require some serious engineering magic. So now comes the really hard part. Nolan had his design, but could anyone actually build it? The job fell to a team of British special effects experts led by a guy named Chris Corbould. And the brief they got from Nolan was pretty intense. Build a car that weighs as much as a small truck, can accelerate like a sports car, and can survive jumping off buildings. Let's talk about what they actually built, because the numbers are pretty wild. The heart of the Tumbler was a 5.7-liter Chevy V8 engine, the same type you might find in a Corvette or Camaro. This engine could pump out around 500 horsepower, which is serious power. To put that in perspective, most regular cars have between 150 to 250 horsepower. Now, 500 horsepower in a regular car would make it incredibly fast. But the Tumbler wasn't a regular car, it weighed 2.5 tons. That's about 5,000 pounds, or roughly the same as two regular cars put together. Despite all that weight, it could still go from 0 to 60 miles per hour in about 5.6 seconds, which is actually pretty impressive. The tire setup was really interesting. In the back, they used 4 massive 44-inch tires, the kind you'd see on serious off-road trucks that climb over rocks and through mud. These gave the Tumbler incredible grip and stability, but up front, they used racing tires, which are designed for speed and precise handling on smooth surfaces. This combination meant the Tumbler could handle both rough terrain and high-speed driving. But the most important feature was the suspension system, basically, the parts that connect the wheels to the car and absorb bumps. The front suspension could move up and down almost 30 inches, which is way more than any normal car. And here's why that suspension was so important. This is probably the most famous scene with the Tumbler, the rooftop chase in Batman Begins. When the script called for the car to jump 60 feet across a gap between buildings, the team didn't use computer effects. They built a massive ramp and actually launched the car through the air. Think about that for a second. They took a 5,000-pound vehicle, launched it 60 feet through the air, and it landed ready to keep driving. The force of that landing would have completely destroyed a normal car. But the Tumbler's custom-built frame and heavy-duty suspension were designed specifically for this kind of punishment. The team actually built 7 different Tumblers for the movies. 4 of them were fully functional stunt cars that could drive on regular streets. Each one cost about $250,000 to build. That's more than most people's houses. They also built specialized versions for specific shots. One had hydraulic systems for close-up maneuvering scenes, and another had a real propane-powered flamethrower for the afterburner effect. That's right, even the flame coming out of the back was real. They installed an actual jet engine nozzle that burned propane. The sound was so loud that everyone on set had to wear ear protection whenever they fired it up. No computer graphics needed. What's really impressive is that by the time they finished filming all 3 movies, all 7 Tumblers were still running. That's a testament to how well they were built. Most movie cars are basically fancy props that break down after a few takes, but these were engineered like real military vehicles. The engineering team had to solve problems that no car manufacturer had ever faced. How do you make a vehicle that's both incredibly tough and surprisingly agile? How do you build something that looks like a tank but drives like a sports car? The solutions they came up with were genuinely innovative. For example, the body panels weren't just for show. They were actually functional armor that could protect the vehicle and its occupants. The steering system had to be completely custom because normal car steering wouldn't work with those massive tires and that much weight. When you see the Tumbler next to regular cars, you really understand the scale of what they built. This wasn't just a modified existing vehicle. It was a completely new machine designed from the ground up. Every component, from the engine mounting to the brake system, had to be custom engineered. The result was something that had never existed before. A vehicle that looked like it belonged in a science fiction movie, but was built with real-world engineering. It proved that with enough creativity and skill, you really can build the impossible. But the Tumbler wasn't just about impressive engineering. It was also packed with some pretty amazing gadgets and weapons. Okay, so we've got this incredibly well-built vehicle, but what makes it truly special are all the amazing features built into it. The Tumbler wasn't just a fast car, it was basically a mobile command center with some seriously cool tricks up its sleeve. Let's start with defense. The most obvious feature was the armor plating. This wasn't just thick metal. The body panels were designed to withstand gunfire and, as we saw in the movies, could smash through concrete walls without taking serious damage. Imagine driving a car that could go through a brick wall like it was made of cardboard. But my favorite defensive feature was something called stealth mode. By shutting down the main engine and switching to a quiet electric motor, the Tumbler could move almost silently. Picture this. You're chasing this loud, roaring vehicle through the city, and suddenly it just goes completely quiet and vanishes into the darkness. That's some serious psychological warfare right there. Now, Batman has a strict no-killing rule, but the Tumbler was still equipped with some impressive firepower. It had 2 machine guns mounted in the front of the vehicle. In the movies, Batman probably used non-lethal rounds, basically rubber bullets or tranquilizer darts. But the weapons themselves were very real. The guns were integrated into the vehicle's design so well that you could barely see them until they were actually firing. This wasn't some obvious military vehicle with weapons sticking out everywhere. It looked like it could be a civilian vehicle until it started shooting. But here's where things get really incredible. The Tumbler's ultimate feature wasn't a weapon or armor. It was an escape system that was so cool, it became one of the most memorable moments in the entire trilogy. In The Dark Knight, the Joker's crew manages to seriously damage the Tumbler with a rocket launcher. In most movies, this would be the end. The hero's vehicle is destroyed, and he has to find another way to escape. But Nolan had a different idea. Instead of just exploding, the Tumbler basically gave birth to a motorcycle. The front wheels and suspension system detached from the main vehicle and reconfigured themselves into a completely separate bike called the Batpod. The handlebars, the seat, the engine, everything formed from parts of the original vehicle. This wasn't computer graphics, by the way. They actually built a working motorcycle that could be assembled from the Tumbler's front end. The Batpod was a real vehicle that could actually be ridden, though it was apparently incredibly difficult to control. The Batpod was steered not with handlebars like a normal motorcycle, but with the rider's shoulders. It didn't have a traditional throttle either, just forward and reverse controls. Only one stunt rider, Jean-Pierre Goy, could actually master riding it. Everyone else who tried it basically crashed immediately. Think about the engineering challenge here. They had to design a motorcycle that could be hidden inside a car, deploy automatically when needed, and still be functional enough to perform movie stunts. It's like something out of a Transformer movie, except it was completely real. The Batpod could do things no normal motorcycle could do. It could make incredibly tight turns, drive up walls, and even drive backwards at high speed. Its unique design, with the rider positioned between 2 massive wheels, gave it capabilities that no conventional vehicle could match. What's amazing is that this entire escape system, from the Tumbler taking damage to the Batpod deploying and driving away, was all practical effects. No green screen, no digital vehicles, just incredible engineering and stunt work. The idea of a primary vehicle that could transform into a secondary escape vehicle was pure genius. It solved a storytelling problem. What happens when the hero's main vehicle gets destroyed in the most spectacular way possible? When you put it all together, the armor, the stealth mode, the weapons, and the Batpod escape system, the Tumbler becomes more than just a vehicle. It's like a Swiss Army knife on wheels, with a solution for every possible situation Batman might face. But all of these amazing features raise an obvious question. What was it actually like to drive this thing? Well, very few people outside the stunt team ever got that chance, but a few lucky celebrities did get to experience the Tumbler firsthand, so we've seen this incredible machine in action on the big screen. But what's it actually like to get behind the wheel? Well, very few people outside of the professional stunt drivers have had that opportunity. But one person who did get to experience it was car enthusiast and talk show host Jay Leno. For an episode of Jay Leno's Garage, Warner Brothers brought one of the original stunt tumblers to Leno's shop. Now, Jay Leno has driven pretty much every supercar ever made: Ferraris, Lamborghinis, McLarens. But you can see in the footage that even he was impressed by the tumbler. What's great about Leno's reaction is that he immediately understood what made the tumbler special. This wasn't just a movie prop dressed up to look cool. It was a genuine piece of automotive engineering. He was amazed that it was a real, functioning vehicle that could actually perform all the stunts seen in the movies. When Leno got behind the wheel, his first comment was about how surprisingly smooth it was to drive. Despite weighing 5,000 pounds and looking like a military vehicle, the Tumbler handled more like a high-performance car. The steering was responsive, the acceleration was impressive, and it was much more comfortable than you'd expect. Leno described the experience as really cool, which, coming from someone who owns hundreds of rare and exotic cars, is pretty high praise. He was particularly impressed by the build quality and attention to detail. Remember, this was a vehicle built specifically for movie stunts, but it was engineered to the same standards as a production car. Talk show host Conan O'Brien also had some fun with Batman's vehicles, though his experience was more comedic than technical. In one segment, he and his sidekick Andy Richter rented a Batmobile, though it was actually the version from Batman v Superman, not the Tumbler. Still, it shows the universal appeal of getting to drive Batman's car. What's interesting is that both Leno and O'Brien, despite their very different approaches, had the same basic reaction: pure excitement. There's something about the idea of driving Batman's car that appeals to everyone, regardless of whether you're a serious car collector or just looking for a good laugh. The Tumbler's impact was so significant that it created its own market. Warner Brothers eventually authorized the creation of a limited run of 10 drivable replicas. These aren't cheap toys. They're meticulously crafted vehicles, built with modern engines, carbon fiber, and Kevlar construction. The price for one of these replicas? $2.99 million. And no, they're not street legal, so you can't actually drive one to work. But for serious collectors, the chance to own a piece of movie history that's also a genuine engineering marvel was apparently worth the cost. Each replica takes about 15 months to build, and they include features like a smokescreen system and that famous jet engine effect. They're built to the same specifications as the original movie cars, which means they're not just display pieces, they're fully functional vehicles. The fact that there's a market for $3 million Tumbler replicas tells you everything you need to know about the impact this vehicle had. It wasn't just a cool movie prop. It became a cultural icon that people wanted to own and experience for themselves. When you look at the most famous cars in movie history, the Tumbler stands out for one key reason: it was real. The DeLorean from Back to the Future was a real car, but it couldn't actually travel through time. James Bond's Aston Martins were real cars, but they didn't actually have ejector seats or machine guns. The Tumbler, on the other hand, could actually do almost everything you saw it do in the movies. It could really jump 60 feet through the air. It really could smash through concrete walls. The Batpod really could deploy from the front end. That level of authenticity is what made it so special. The Tumbler proved that sometimes the most amazing movie magic happens when you don't use any magic at all, just incredible engineering, creative problem solving, and a willingness to build the impossible. And that's the incredible story of the Tumbler, from a garage experiment to a global icon of movie engineering. It showed that with enough creativity and determination, you really can build vehicles that seem impossible. It set a new standard for practical effects in movies and proved that sometimes the real thing is more impressive than any computer graphics. So here's what I want to know from you. What do you think is the coolest feature of the Tumbler? Is it the incredible jumping ability? The stealth mode? That amazing Batpod Escape system? Or maybe something else entirely? Drop a comment below and let me know what impressed you the most. If you enjoyed learning about the engineering behind this amazing vehicle, I'd really appreciate it if you could hit that like button. It helps more people discover these kinds of videos. And if you want to see more deep dives into movie technology and engineering, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss our latest videos. Speaking of amazing movie technology, thanks so much for watching, and remember, sometimes the most incredible things you see on screen are the ones that are completely real. We'll see you in the next video.